Hello everyone, welcome to XYZ podcast. I'm Gary. Today I have Ryoga as my partner
Hello.
to help co-host this interview conversation with Realrich. Maybe I can add on a little bit background how I know Realrich. It's very interesting and I find Realrich is a very friendly person because usually if I wanted to find the guest for interviews through Instagram, it's very hard because it's a very informal way to approach a guest, but then really is like very helpful and very responsive to reply my message. I was like so excited. And then and at the point of time I approached to him because of the PAM discussion and then the topic called other ways of doing architecture. So he himself founded a raw architecture firm in a studio in 2011, and also not just the architectural studio but also Oma Library because my the previous guests that I interviewed when DTO presented her works in Oma Library. So somehow when I was doing her research, then I found Oma Library. And I found out that it's very interesting. That's why I thought to talk to Ririk because of Oma Library and also his architectural practice somehow combine this kind of what he would call a practical and theoretical research laboratory. I think as a students we kind of resonate that very well that to understand like 5A and 5B assignment we need to have this kind of research and practical side. And also because Ririk is a third generation of builders in his family, so I thought this is very well reflected and also presented in his works, especially the bamboos projects and also talks about crafts, and it's very obvious in that sense. And perhaps today we will talk about a lot of topics, but we try our best to commodify a little bit. And also because his works are, recently got a lot of recognitions in a way, because I also noticed his works before that from Dizine or because of Alpha Omega. And Alpha Omega is a very interesting project. Later we can talk about it because I found that the project constitutes a lot of lessons from different kind of projects he has done. That's why I think one of the questions later I will ask is that how do you see doing the project in the same way, but how to learn differently, even though from the same direction. And also really also educator in Indonesia. So in that sense, we can achieve two realm of practicing and also teaching from Ririk today. So without further ado, hi Ririk, how are you?
Hi, Gary. Hi, Ryoga. How are you doing? I'm good. I'm fine.
Really nice to see you and catch up again with you.
Yes, and let's talk about the art of war then.
Yes, yeah, because that time before the event, I spoken to Ririk and then he said art of war should be introduced into architectural module.
That is very interesting to think about like that.
Yeah, I think in the end also we wish to ask Ririk about role of architects. I think that's pretty critical because I think in the end we always see being an architect as a goal, but then what kind of architect is a different story.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but before that, I want to ask Ryoga, in a very general term, how do you see? This is a very big question for the start.
Okay.
How do you see like Indonesian architectural scene? Because you have done a few research on Ryrik's works as well.
I think like Indonesian architecture scene is growing, and then like what's interesting is like we are too busy. It's like a laboratory. It's like a test chamber where everybody testing their own ideas. We have different cultures coming here and there. We take a lot of inspiration here and there. So it's like there's not a lot of international style that happening in Indonesia, but like we test our own ideas, our own identity, if that makes sense, and I like going here and there. So it's like it's a very vibrant architecture scene actually in Indonesia. I saw it like that. That's why like when I graduate, I want to go back and like join the architecture scene in Indonesia because I think it's very vibrant.
I think in order to join this kind of Indonesian architecture scenes to contribute part of it is because the idea of root, because you born there and then you have the certain attachment to the place. Right. But I wanted to ask Ririk now is how about your childhood in a way, like your attachment to architecture or this career? Because like we have seen in your bio that you are the third generation of the construction builder in this sector, and I wonder how your childhood shaped the current self of you now.
Yeah. As far as you mentioned, I came from a builder's family. My grandfather was a respected builder from Samarinda, it's in Borneo.
Oh, I see.
My father was also a builder and structural engineer, graduated from Parahyangan University in Bandung. In contrast, my grandfather was a self-trained person. So I spent my childhood in Surabaya. It's another city. And my father worked in Jakarta. And the distance between Surabaya and Jakarta is around 700 kilometers. He traveled back home every week. So my childhood was formed by seeing and accompanying my mother every day. So I was like her bodyguard for social meeting with Catholic group, helping her making cookies. And I was like her bodyguard. Our home in Surabaya has a big backyard. There was also a chicken coop with many tools in the backyard, because my father was a builder. So I like to play it like making my own sword. The idea of toys is like a tectonics grammar. It's like you make the toy by yourself. And I was really proud of my sword, even though it's not perfect. It's the house is also situated, is interesting, near the Red District area. Prostitution area called the Gangdoli. The distance is only 250 meters, very close. And I experienced my childhood to see the backstage of how people struggle for life. So I meet crazy people who is literally crazy, homeless, and spend our evenings strolling on the street, seeing many people interacting, playing rollerblades, roller shoes, and buying street snacks. The road is different like Jakarta, was really alive. I think my living area is like a transition area, it's like a kampung. And along that neighborhood, it's like a carpenters from my father's staff live around our house as well. So I think it's named Pak Bardi. I mean, I love to see him working while passing his house while I'm cycling. So it's a diverse and rich neighborhood. So I think it's if I'm not an architect, I'll be. So for sure, I was interested in quite a social mission because of my mother. I love to accompany her to go like a Catholic group for praying, things like that. I was trained to be like that, to be like in the social missions, things like that. So I think that's my childhood.
Did you visit Samarinda a lot? Because I know a lot. I grew up in Balikpapan.
Yes. I mean, sometimes I visit Samarinda, and the relation in that area is pretty close. Was pretty close, and like our grandfather, they know between each other, and opens up new relations, client and architect relations, and then the builders. I mean, among the generation. So my grandfather was still quite has a name there, even though it's like that. I think almost like 15 years. Like it's the story is like my grandfather's like to train people, and if you pass the border, you will meet him like cigaretting with the people in the forest, and he like hunting bears, and then he cut his finger because of bitten by bears.
Yes.
And I think it's quite interesting to see how the affections, the feeling for my grandfather was happening as well by the ex-staff of my grandfather, who's now working together with me in the studio. So we've got like a person who's like 70 years old right now in the company.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to say their memory, and they can cry if they talk about my grandfather.
True. And like I will go a little bit deeper because this remind me of your talk before, and then like you, and I feel it as well because I took a class called Advanced Construction Technology, and I learned how advanced the construction technology in the UK. And then when I heard what you said about Indonesian is really artisans, really craftsmanship. Like like one people that is in the builder job, and then they're really good at like, oh, this one, I know that this guy is really good at concrete, or this guy's really good on like brick laying or something like that. It's like, it's a really different approach. It's not that we are left behind by the technology, but like actually we develop our own way of coping with this, and I found it very beautiful in Indonesia actually, the artisans. That's why you say you have like this 70 years old working together with you in your studio, and I think it's like very, very cool.
So I think it's a mix of like adopting the so-called the quote unquote old knowledge or ancient knowledge that passed down like a heritage, and also integrate it into the modern technology or modern needs in a way. So in that case, I think that comes at the right time to ask about like dynamics of raw studio as well. Because it was founded in 2011, and then Omar is kind of like later, isn't it? Like started off like maybe 3-4 years later. Yeah. So
yes, that's right.
Yeah, how do you see the balance in a way? Because I always have this hesitation in a way that, of course, I mean, monetary wise, it's not really the focus, but rather is the enjoyment and also the passion to do, like library or literature or research based. But it's just that in architectural scene, we see more on building, where as an architect you must build, and then if you don't build, you cannot consider yourself as an architect. So in this sense, how do you see the dynamic in a way that to maintain it as the business model to, I mean, more or less you still need to cover back the cost that Omar perhaps will more or less come out. Maybe need to upkeep the building or updating the shelf or the resources. Yeah,
That's
I mean,
right.
yeah, in general, like practice wise, how do you, or even resources, how do you allocate, like, okay, maybe I need 1 or 2 people to be the so-called librarian to help take care or curate the books and all. For the practice wise, then it's pretty much like what we have seen is very busy with drawings and project management.
Okay, there are 15 people as a designers and 3 people as a librarians. So at the time you like the proportions, and there are like 5 to 10 people as administrations, meaning the archiving the documents. So for me, archives is very important.
Yeah.
And there are many other writers like who help our library, the Oma library. There are 3 significant space if you like map the guha inside my studio. One is library. Every day I discuss the research inside, brainstorm, evaluation, wrote, read, and made new hypothesis. This area is theoretical work. I call it a nuclear reactor.
Nuclear reactor.
Because literacy is like a nuclear reactor for me. But the archival rooms is another place. It's the place for my team and me where I sit in the middle of the group. My desk is become our big meeting table because a lot of information happening around me. And the desk was actually made by a Laurentia grandfather, who was a carpenter as well. So it has like a 45 centimeter width of thick wood. The surface is lovely. And I saw how the joineries are exposed, and the back of the table is also beautiful, which is not seen by people who use it. But if you look at it more detail, it's George's front and back, and it's a good process that I appreciate. So in the middle of the studio, the archival rooms, I mean, along the archiving is made by the administrations. So, that I divided the work by placing the technical thinking to the standardization team. I mean, at the back of my seating, and the critical thinking or development to the design team is a conceptual. It's in front of me of 5 people and 5 people. Another 5 people is for to do a management constructions. So the nature is very diverse, and we have the nature of the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, consultancy as well, and the structural engineering. So it's like I think it's also a research studio for the detailing and then conceptual method as well.
Wow. Okay.
I try to select the projects in the very limited and then very specific condition that client kind of like of our projects.
Yeah.
Rather than just conditioning something that we have to push our energy to just convince the client. So by selecting the project, actually it helps the process to be more improved one to another time. I think in order to get the OMA, when first started in 2015 or at the end of 2014, it couldn't sustain by itself. Since after I think 2019, and it can start to sustain because the idea to publish a book. Because I needed the time to formulate the theoretical thinking. It takes a long time.
Yes.
To form that thinking. I need like 7 years to formulate the thinking and make a map for OMA. And then suddenly a lot of helps coming from the many writers because we have economic sharing.
Right.
So I think after that it can sustain. In 2019 we've got the publication like I think more than 20 suddenly. And right now in each month we publish one book.
It's
Either
like
we yes, it's like a MIT Press book.
Right.
The strange details and all of these A5 books is like more like a theoretical and an observation book.
Yeah.
And I think that's a meaning that's the theory and reality, and it helps the studio grow even profound. I think in terms of the theoretical, it can be mapped quite easily after we did the literations ongoing. It's become a continuous reflection moment for me. So I can know we don't need to chase this bar and we need to reposition to that bar even quite easy because of the informations like a flux going to the guha as an ecosystem. We've got the reality, we have got imagination, and we've got the fantasy, and it's like coming into life. And I mean, the idea is to training people, Gary Ryoga. It's not easy to train the writer and to train the designer. And to have this both realm and combine it together, I think it's quite primal. I think I call this one as a bricolage. It's a compositions. Like I remember your podcast with the John Glesmeyer when you discuss about the architecture without architects.
Yeah.
I do really believe it as one of the method as a barefoot architects to like use the daily like a pop out like a things in the art, but to mix it with the power of theory. I think is the new. I think it's quite exciting to twist the imaginations. I think that.
Yeah, I think like the books that I'm more fascinated by the fact that it's not on the business side, but rather how to make a certain things sustainable, because we can't neglect the fact that you mentioned like reality in a way that there is a realistic need and also burden in a way, quote unquote. But I wouldn't say the burden always a bad thing, but rather it's the challenges that how to push a certain things further. Like you said, Oma Library, in the early times, it doesn't really make it happen in a way like, like a sustainable business. I'm not saying like whether money making or not, but rather how to make it last long. And then because I saw the topics that the book published, they are not really restricted into a very specific topic, but rather I believe that sometimes in having breakfast and then you think, okay, let's talk about Tada Ando, and then somehow will come out a book about Tada Ando. And this topic will be endless, because when we talk about Ando, is how many kinds of Ando we want to talk about. Are we talking about his personal story? It could be one book. And then we want to talk about light and shadow, it could be one book. And then talk about concrete, another book. So it's so endless. And then we are just talking about Japan one architects. We haven't talked about a lot of things. So I think I'm really fascinated by the fact that because this power of publication is that allows this kind of flexibility for different kind of people to interpret. Because I saw your books are not just written by yourself, you're also co-writing with different people. So you have your own taste into it and also composition. But I think after that also the writer can add in. I think what I would love to see next is that, because it could be in English, because I can't really understand Indonesian language, because so far all is Indonesian, and I understand your concern because this, you wanted to relate this context to Indonesian architecture student education, right? Especially targeting on the issue like you mentioned, literacy, which later on we can talk more about it. I just wanted to add like one thing. Sorry, Ryoga, maybe you want,
Okay.
because I really love these small quotes that you put up on the door. It says "through hardships to the stars." I think this also from I saw this writing on the mayonnaise jar. Mayonnaise jar is a very interesting blog. And then it says "Through hardships to the stars," and I really wanted to ask, like, like you mentioned, perhaps financially, financial burden could be one challenge, but what kind of hardships that you could resonate the most throughout your practice since like 2011, or even throughout your career, like since you work and step into architectural career, and what is the hardship do you think that is very tough that almost make you give up architecture as a choice?
Okay, I'll be really honest right now. In my life, there is a moment of anxiety where I face problems. When I made it, I thought, do I want to exit? Is this problem is essential? And how could I learn new things to face this problem? I found out that if I place not myself but other people, I think I can recover a bit. So I think anxiety is one of the things that I made mayonnaise jar as my recovery moment during in the nighttime or in the morning, 3 a.m. things like that. When I get that kind of anxiety, I started to write something, and I got that hardship of the writing. So I write to share my learning curve as an architect, as a builder, as a father as well, to recover my relation with my son, heaven and miracle, and then hopefully I can be proud as a husband. And I'm really personal in architecture because I cannot escape from architecture even for one day. I cannot escape.
Career poison.
Yeah, I agree with
this. But it's my wife also. My wife said that, can you not even think about architecture for one day? I said I cannot. Even what you do, what you think is all about architecture.
Yes.
And she's quite curious about my thinking. The consistency is built of perfections. The perfections produces hardship, and the process needs to lower my ego, and this helps to overcome anxiety. And my father said to me always, the most important is that you always goes to basic. Really love your projects and make sure that you are happy. If you work on that, every client and the future client will love you. So the stars are in the daily routines. So my father told me his experience shaped my thinking, such as he and my mother used to meet his boss or his client in the morning, really morning, just to meet and greet, talk about the current projects, future projects, also handling invoice. That's why my father got trusted. So he's doing work with his life, and that's an inspiration. So I think that's, looking at the hardship, I believe this materiality in the architecture produces tectonics. I think that's a hardship, because if you want to push it to the details, like for grammar, it's an explicit language of architecture because it's the identity. It marks the identity that, okay, we as an architect, we are also a builder. And then builder ecosystem started from the small things. And that's why small things are essentials and personal for me. So I started practice in the garage, right? And in the middle of the gated community. And then I didn't have so much space, and efficiency is significant. Space is limited. So the tectonics grammar actually exposes the limitations. So actually, young people and all of, I try to just challenge the limitations with all of this, the exploration in the several materials become one.
Okay.
It's not like a one monotonous language. It's just like a several material, which is very optimal, is become one. So I think that's make it good thinking to challenge our process. So looking at the I remember my father. I always coined from my Mark Twain quotes like sing like no one's listening and like you have never been hurt, but it's difficult. The traumatized of architecture like hurts me like hell actually.
Yeah.
Like losing and getting the wrong things in the details. Like you have to ask a forgiveness from the client sometimes. And one of the recipe is just honest. But quotes of my father always said like love like you've never been hurt, and dance like nobody's watching, and life like is heavens on earth. So I think this reconciliation to my own anxiety, I think is during routines. I think it helps me to brings recovery during my daily routines. I think it will end up a book by Rafael Moneo, Theoretical Anxiety, which I really, really profoundly getting inspired from.
Yeah, I just want to add a quick one because I always thought that, I was once talking to a friend and then it seems to be the world are looking at the beauty of evidence and science. We always believe that, practical sense in a way that 1 + 1 = 2. That's it. You don't have to argue. Okay. That's true. But then that's science in a way. And then we always believe like what it works like forms follow function is always the best kind of thing, I can't deny that. But it's just that when we over glorify science and then we sort of forget the intangible side of art, like the art where you can't explain. The beauty is that you can't explain. That's the beauty. And then when I asked my friend who the reason why people can't see art, because art is always invisible until you hold it and you feel it and you touch it. So science is the science of art in a way that, we look at psychology, medical science, hospital, clinical side of it. And then she told me that art is also important because art is art of science. And art of science in a way that is like how Realrich see his life in a way that from his personal philosophy. And this will ensure the balance where how do you see things like be calm and be patient and things. I think a lot of time these are the knowledge that lacking in architecture education because we tend to say, form is like this, circle, square and things, it's a very technical side. Yeah.
And I can feel Realrich saying that there's a lot of like traumatized an architecture, but like we cannot stop loving architecture. It's so weird. I was talking about this to Gary. It's like, wow, I think architect is like a bunch of masochists, man. We love like giving all of our best. We're like giving of all of our time to architecture. Even we cannot stop thinking about architecture in one day, even though we are like, wow, so tired of it. But like we keep thinking and we're doing it. Like if we go traveling and then we just go, it's like, wow, very smooth concrete. I'll touch here and there,
I think in speaking of raw concrete, I wanted to like concrete like texture wise, because I also look at raw studios works from the early one, like perhaps we can see like raw first office there is a certain a frugality in there. It's like what B. Doshi been talking about, this kind of frugality, very honest and tell this kind of fundamental basic. And then after that, when we look at like Akanaka and bare minimalist or Istakaga, I hope I pronounced it right. So from those early works, I would say I'm looking at the portfolio, and then after it slowly evolved into Dancer is a very huge milestone, I would say, and also Alpha Omega. So I think the philosophy is always there in a way by using raw materials, but then the form is sort of changing into various directions. But I wonder, how do you see do you see form will somehow tell different kind of language of materials, or do you think it's kind of similar thing? It's just different experience in the way that, you know, when we walk through a linear or straight wall versus a curved wall, it will definitely different. But do you think form will change the property or the language that you wish to tell by material?
Oh, that's a theoretical question. I believe that I run the idea in the simple geometry and the complexity in tectonics. But if you look only on the, our studio's geometry, if you judge the work only from the form making, it will not success. But if you covered the cover from the how we learn and transform from one to another project, they're like we call it like a red strings. From one to another, we try to challenge, idea, the philosophical. I mean, in Indonesia, to be honest, in the daily craftsmanship, there are limitations of resources. Machines and the industrial building technology, they are important. But if you see the handcrafted craftsmanship, we have a really talented and hardworking people and good workmanship. So I form the linear and the straightforward rectangle. Actually, it's used to be the beginning of the learning curve because it's the most easy language that people can understand. After the team went on board, it can be exponentially cannot be stopped. But this also shows the context on how to make things simple for the constructions. And looking more detail into the client's twisting and form, I think is challenge the client's fantasy and imagination as well, and challenge my fantasy and imagination as well. It's become like a laboratory optic becoming like the things that you want to challenge behind your reality. When I start to jump, it's not simplistic like a nerves, but we have to combine it with the tectonics, which deals with the craftsmanship. So how we communicate just leap between the thinking traditional craftsmanship into the building technology. So I think there are three triangle again, like a limitation of resources, the machines, what's available, and the building technology. So if we complete that three, so whatever the fantasy, I think it's a challenge of our status of quo. I think it's challenging myself and our team to create a form that's like understated as well.
I just wanted to add, like, because Ryoga mentioned to me like the usual, the unusual, right?
Yeah, usual.
And also in that you also mentioned natural selection, which I'm very keen to know more because of Darwin's theory, right? Darwinian theory, and natural selection mentions like the reason why certain things will get outcast because one is that you have something good that better, and then it will overcome the so-called the good one no longer become good. It will be like because the better one comes out, or when the worst one become worsen, it's like the bad things become even bad or worsen. So in this sense, like you say, this kind of challenge the limitation is, do you see you wanted to bring back the craftsmanship into a better stage, or you just simply think that, you know, I wanted to challenge myself into creating a so-called architectural style in a way? It might sound very superficial, but because how I see it is that in order to challenge is that one is you want make good things to be a better one, or you wanted to bring something from the ancient knowledge or past knowledge into current stage. I think, do you think so, or do you think both also happen at the same time?
I think I believe that the future of Indonesian architecture is about the integrating traditional craftsmanship with the building technology.
Okay, right.
So that's my belief. And then I got that kind of premise in our practice. and then try to inject it in the studio. Unpredictable things happening, which is beautiful, like involving the generations of training. For example, how to have generations of craftsmanship training. Example, one area in Sumedang is known as a bamboo craftsman area. Another one area is Cilacap is known as a village of the stone masonry. Another area of Karawang known of its gypsum and paint finishes. It started with one or small group, and it's become like a social theory.
Yes.
And it's just one layer of the craft. We've got another layer like tectonics, the grammar of the materiality, and the design methodology as another thing, as a design method grammar. I think at the end, it's very varied because of it has a multiple conditions in order to achieve the efficiency. So I mean, as an architect, I was quite lucky in the craftsman ecosystem because of I was just trying to being honest with myself, and I think that's a unique context of Indonesia that's around me so far. And the spirit of style in modernism, I think, has so far brought it forward a lot of beautiful things. But in the other way, the traditional craftsmanship is brought again the another beautiful streams of the architecture. So I think that's two streams. I think helps to if in the practice I try to integrate it. And then the result of the detail, the tectonics, the method itself is quite a combination between a top down and then a bottom up. So I think it's fulfilling as a team. So when the project finished and we just sing from the front facade, and we just you got a feeling when you got this achievement together and you eat together in front of your side, it's fulfilling. And we still have that kind of layer in Indonesia. So I think that's things that make me happy.
I want to ask, because like I've been listening, and then you talk about tectonic grammar. I really like this. I really like this. How do you describe it? It's a tectonic grammar. And then like you one of your lecture you talk about like you build a tectonic grammar differently for different people. So it's like for builder it's different, for craftsman it's different. It's like is it a matter of like translating the grammar into an easier way to understand the building method, or is it designing something that easy to understand? So like there's two different things. So one's like you design something that easy to build, or like, and the other is like a complex thing that you translate it into something easier to understand for this technique.
That's yes. So first of all, the first step is like there are several steps. The first step is like to make it easy and understandable for the builder to make. The second step, to challenge it together. Can we make it more efficient? Another step to like to decrease the weight of the materials, because by decreasing the weight and decreasing the volume, and you got the efficiency of it. And by testing and talking I think usually it's like 5 to 10 iterations on the building of models, like tweaking and talking, and a lot of imagination together. And then after that, we got the deal. Okay, phase one. Okay, we can get one prototype. And when it's done, we draw it. We draw it and we evaluate it again. And we build it again with another version. So basically, grammar is like continuous evaluation of the ecosystem of the material.
Okay.
So it's not one monotonous material. It's combined traditional and the building technology. So usually like a bamboo combined with the a construction adhesive, it become one monotonous material. So we can always like do something like that, like not okay, this is like a pure material, so we won't disturb it with another material.
Yes.
I think that's kind of logics. We don't have it in the studio.
Okay.
So it's just a very loose. And then that's why I call it like a bricolage.
Yeah.
The combinations together become like a one symphony.
But I just wanted to add on, like, because Ryoga raised a very good point, is the idea of the language and grammar. Is it possible to translate and deliver this language to general public as well? Because sometimes how we perceive beauty is very differently, because we're going through architectural school and training is gonna be quite different. Perhaps we might get influenced by, by Vitruvius talking about these three theory and criteria, but for general public they don't understand this kind of theory, or in Italian or Renaissance, this idea. But I think I just wanted to give one example in a way, like, because I saw there is a bamboo project, and then you put on quite some ornaments. I think idea on ornaments seems to be like very prohibited in architecture.
Ornaments and crime.
Ornaments and crime, like Adolf Loos is saying about that. But for you, it's like you're seeing it's not that you wanted to embrace it as the significant feature, but rather you give more space for the builders to explore and express themselves. So in this sense, how do you see the relationship between architects and general public? Do you see the mistranslation in that sense? So if there is a mistranslation or miscommunication, how do you engage architects closer to general public to make more closer to human heart in a way?
I appreciate the idea of ornaments.
Yeah.
To tectonics grammar, to make a symphonies in arranging the best material for the best place, its durability, and its aesthetic quality, and the affordability of each material. But I also appreciate the idea of simplicity. So that kind of a more generalized idea is just to generalize problem. But in my mind, when the designer arranges the material in very appropriate manner, it can achieve a quality of simple but it's beautiful. I think for my mind, an architect shouldn't be afraid of the judgment. I mean, how far you can appreciate simplicity? It's in your mind, right? And how far can you measure sustainability and carbon efficiency? I mean, it can be tangible. I mean, the workmanship can be measured by logic and by critical thinking. I think that's one most important to select the material. So about the ornament, I think is needed because doing art and craft is needed, but don't be to generalize into like a stylistic basis. I think it needs to enrich, the details. They are the best, but don't be too diet with all of this kind of very simplistic basic without any life. I mean, the building needs a touch of the hand, and you need to open your horizon. So the building needs to have a multiple phase. So I think that's the symphony of the language. So I think that marks the way to form the collaborations in between. I'm more into like some of the my friends say that our architecture is like you opposing each of the material together in the beginning. For me, I don't really feel it, but I try to put in harmony in the beginning before I started, not in the opposite. Oppositions is not what I want. The harmony, that's what I want. But to open up the horizon to the multiple, so to just test it, because I think it's one of the mission that I have to test the building to as much as we can when the resource is available. So I think that's why I call it like a you need to plus like a theory, you need to plus tectonics, and you need to plus your own fantasy, not to be afraid of something, and you can repositioned your thinking again.
Mm.
So that triangle, I think, make it quite rich. I mean, in terms of the method, quite promising,
Yeah.
like a tasting something that's okay, this is promising. If you taste something, okay, this is usual, I've been here before. I mean, that's not promising for me. You will spend in that project for another a year or 2 year or 3 year just facing the same routinity.
It sounds,
I've done it before. But I think in the some of the later period of my life, I want to experience something else.
It seems to be like you are developing your own Vitruvius theory, because he talks about utility and stability and beauty. Perhaps you is like another different kind of triangle theory that you have in your practice. Ryoga, what do you think? I mean, like I wanted to ask much more general question before I ask, like there is a question much more relevant to Realrich practice in. I mean, I just wanted to add on because like Indonesian architecture scene, I already asked like earlier stage, and also this I would like to relate to. Are we too shallow in the understanding of raw materials and also not, I wouldn't say style, but rather in identity? Because like you said, Indonesian architecture mix quite a few things. Like one of the prominent one, perhaps from your previous working experience, is rather Japanese side, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I wonder, how do you see in general, and do you think even though it mix up with different kind of cultural elements, but still there is an expression of local materials or local understanding? And also, in speaking of raw materials, I always wanted to go critical in a way that it's not about simply using raw materials and then you can rectify or certify in a way that saying that, oh, I'm a good architect in the sense, but raw materials also related to local resources. Like, do you source this bamboo from outside, like 700 or 1,000 kilometers away, just to build your house? And also how craftsmanship that embrace and also use the local materials. That could be another story. I wonder what's your thought in this also.
Yeah, so like it's the same like what I agree a lot with Rick, saying that the craftsmanship, because I feel this is what happens like when I go to sites, like, oh yeah, this guy is really good with concrete, and then, like this guy can say to me, oh, do you want chamfered, Mister? Your chamfered? Wow, this guy can know chamfer, bro. Like, wow, very very like they know what they're doing. But I know like right. It's the limitation of like our building construction that is not really advanced compared to other country. And then because of this, like we develop a very artisan people that this guy is good with this guy with this is good with joinery. It's like this guy with, and I love that. I love that scene. And then because of that, I found this like we are behind on the construction technology. It's kind of a blessing because in Indonesia we did not follow like international style. We have like influences here and there, but like we're too busy mixing up, calculating, and like formulating our own identity of architecture. And then now there's no Indonesian identity for architecture because we are born from Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, which is like very different here and there. And then like there's a lot of conversation because of that. So some people say that this is A and this is B, and like have different influences with material, with traditional architecture. But like most of the time they're like testing their own ideas with this local craftsmanship and this limit of building construction.
I wanted to ask Realrich because Charles Jenks, he did this evolution trees, like talks about from the evolution of style. It's not just style seeing as a style in a way, just like a fashion style, but rather it's the evolution or based on the political or economical or cultural elements that influence architectural aesthetic in a way. And then he called it the attraction basin in a way. At one point you can see why Foster, Richard Rogers, Renzo Piano all in one side, and then you see Zaha, Frank Gehry, MAD from China. They tend to have this kind of very very digital era. And then now we are moving into like B.L. Ingalls era or even like Alejandro Aravena. How do you see in this sense in Indonesia? Do you see the changes in speaking of architecture identity in timeline? I wonder what's your thought. Yeah, really.
Okay, after Indonesian independence, where architecture is brought to the front stage as a political tools by the elite. And that era was inspired by the Brasilia schemes of Oscar Niemeyer.
Yeah.
The pure geometrical form inspired many architects and politicians. It's an easy way to show that architecture can move on in the 1960s. After that era in 1970s, there was area of regionalism where the architect and the politicians tried to establish the identity of Indonesia by placing traditional roofs on the top on the public buildings, and to preserve traditional architecture. So every era of political change has its own establishing the architecture for the nations. But notably, few lecturers who came home after studying overseas came home in 1980s, and they tried to be more critical and independent by spreading postmodernism and filmmaking to students. And Hola in 1990s, there was a movement of young Indonesian architects who wanted to be more essential and unique.
Yeah.
Even though Father Mangunwijaya said, Mangunwijaya is one of our father in the architecture because he's more into like a social activist, said that the explorations of the young Indonesian architect lacked total architecture. You know, total architecture by Gropius, you need to have like a more holistic to the furniture and the product design until the last. And he saw that the result of the exhibition in the 1990s was more outdated. But it's like a critical discourse between architecture, you know. I remember the notion brought by Siegfried Gideon, time and space in order, was more into the stylistic and pragmatic basis. But I think I think 20 or 30 years after that, by Frampton, I think it has a real deal when he coined a tectonics culture towards the poetic of constructions, meaning that the profession challenge is on the process of understanding the language of context to the materiality on how things he built to the bolt and screw. I think many architects in Indonesia got inspiration from Japanese architecture, like what you and many architects in the world did too. And many prominent architects in Indonesia made the pilgrimage to Japan, and including the Indonesian Young Architect Forum founder. And even he wrote about book about it also. I mean, the idea is to have a pilgrimage. Actually, it's get to inspired from the method, tectonics, and understand that Japan architecture has their own fantasy and imagination to address their own philosophical positions. For example, Zen or Shinto as a belief to architecture. But the challenge itself as our country, I mean, in like a post-colonial nation, to challenge is to go beyond deep, not the top of the cream of the cake. And then the idea of the world of the imagination, fantasy about our own Indonesia, I think it's a way to uncover Indonesian identity in a way more contemplative. I think many of the Indonesian architects try to find the DNA of behind of the architect's work. And then I think if we true of where our roots are around us and the demography of the social and economic things, if we are true and not I mean having to deep to the stylistic thing, which is not the thing that I always believe. I believe that successive DNA of Indonesian architecture integrates traditional craftsmanship, architecture, and building technology to achieve more sustainable design. From the philosophical level to the bolt and screw level, which is more detailed and tectonics and the evaluation of the details, things like that. And that will requested, I mean, that's criteria, not only in the form making, but the question is how far we can go. This is just a dictum, you know. The difficult part is to walk the word.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So I think
just
that's
you mentioned Frampton also. I think is a very very simple term when he said critical regionalism. Regionalism itself is just regionalism, but he add on the critical is something that we have to understand by using the past to move us forward, kind of a reflection that I think really already kind of expressed, and his works kind of self-explanatory, telling us this kind of philosophy as well. Yeah, do you want to add on something?
No, I just like I agree.
Yeah,
I don't like it's quite bold. I think the statement.
I think also because me and Ryoga also working on something, and then he also taught me some Indonesian language. Even though I'm from Malaysia, Malay, and the language itself at some point quite close. And then he was talking about like when you go to someone's house, it's like a sopan kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then the sitting on the floor is lesehan kind of thing. So those are little. I think sometimes perhaps we don't have to look at it in a rather architectural way, but rituals.
Yes.
But how people use the space is very interesting as well. I think next question I would like to ask is something that we were talking about DNA in a way that how projects. I think Renzo Piano also saying that each project is like their baby or their children, which I think is very true. It's like because you as the author that you come up with something, more or less you will have this kind of signature. I think you can't deny that is whether you want to call it style or identity is a signature. And I realized the projects in Raw Studios, they are correlated. It's not about like materials, but rather lesson. Like for example, Sumara, Piandeling, Kujang, and Sederhana, they are actually correlated in a way, they're learning from each other. And Guha itself is a very complex thing because it's like, it's a mix of office and home, and also Guha Guild and Guha Bamboo. And I remember like Andy Warhol and Rem Koolhaas talk about this kind of reusing ideas. It's not saying that you are lazy, but rather it's because you find it very interesting to integrate with the new projects.
Maybe you think like it's like you keep saying it to strengthen your point.
Yeah, it's to strengthen the point. Yeah. So I think I'm curious what Realrich thoughts on this, like when you are integrating into new thing, what is the quote unquote compromise and also the tolerance in a way that how do you allow the new things and also the things that you learn from the behind, and also how do you filter out these kind of choices? Is it by budget or is it by materials that you have? Because I remember one of the project is you recycle the plastic container from the previous pavilion and then as part of the projects.
I think in the actual practice, I strategize like every day in the Monday morning what we should do in this 1 week period and what we should do in the this month period, and we review it together in the Monday morning. So we just have like these chit chat things, but the idea is to channel the resources and then all of the labors inside the resources of the studio. That's the first idea. That's I get the inspiration from the Architecture Without Architects by Rudowski. And that barefoot architects techniques, notion of using and testing material to find on site and optimize front yard. This kind of method of design shows vernacularism of practicality. It uses everyday material, but it's also creative and tested by the time. I found out that approach is not enough, actually. Only like testing the material one to another is not enough. It's becoming like a stereotype. So how can we break out that stereotype into another level of the using of the material? So I found out that we need to integrate reality with the thinking, which is the area of imagination and fantasy. And that is the area of architectural theory and fine art. So that three streams of the reality, I just try to open the secret of our practice, but it's to integrate with the imagination and fantasy, brings a beautiful symphony of pre-collage architecture. So I think I need to make sure that there is a creative language in architecture. If not, there is no hope. which opens to the new things, and also a critical thinking towards its use and evaluation towards archive. So I think archive is one of the tools to summarize everything, and we need to publish it into like in the manual book. So, and overall, I can say that budget is one of the most important thing to start on, to communicate your resources with the clients and with the engineers. Banally, I mean, to be honest as you can. If you have like a marble on site, you talk with the owner. If you want to help him to sell the marble, talk with the owner. I mean, it's like a very maintaining the resources, and it's the language of the everyday life. And I think the public can understand architecture after we get this technique. In unifying that aspects, the design will get a breakthrough. I think it's feel fulfilled, because the relation with the owner, they can finally understand, okay, architecture involving the building as well, involving the resources of it, involving the budget as well, involving the management, involving the schedule, involving the MEP, involving the structure. So architecture could be a breakthrough if we maintain this kind of not only multidisciplinary but multi-perspective, that we can always push the boundary. So I think that's kind of thinking is not like only like a collecting materials or collecting labors. It deals with the quite of engaging the some kind of levels of theory and some levels of the this creative like of fantasy and imagination, that okay, you can do it then, you can do it then. And it's like nobody can hold you. Okay, we need to talk with this client, talk with that client to just make a symphony in order to get utilized that project into. So I think in order to get that, and of course there's gonna be like appreciation to architects, to our side, to my side. It's becoming like a saying grateful to us, or giving like a we can get paid. So I think it's many levels, like economic and appreciations by pushing the boundary.
I wanted to mention one little story, because Kuhas, I was reading his story, and then he said he designed like a shoebox house for a client, and then who knows, he transformed in the Lisbon auditorium, or the gallery that he designed. And I wonder of course in architectural practice, perhaps there will be a lot of proposals that perhaps some didn't make it to get built, but somehow you get perhaps you design something and you found out, okay, it's quite nice, if let's say we can use it now, So I wonder, is there any and this kind of epiphany that you found out, okay, maybe I can try this out in Guha Bamboo, Perhaps when I was doing this, perhaps Alpha Omega, something that I could do, maybe it's not this place or this client, maybe I can do it in other projects. So I wonder, for Realrich, perhaps is this something very common in practice? Is it
yes, of course. It's very common to test one thing that it doesn't work, and we can always put it inside our mind again, and we test it to another projects. But Kulhas, I think he did the same, even though he did not admit it in his talk. But I think Ram Kulhas started the discussion by discussing method, program, and how design can measure the limit. I think he made the vocabulary of things. I mean, looking at his method, it's always like a vocabulary of things. And a lot of great architects always started with the vocabulary of things by transforming their thinking. I think that's mentioned by Rafael Moneo, right, in Theoretical Anxiety, that Kulhas has a technique of free sections and crossing the program to have public activity on the vertical level. It started with the collecting the vocabulary from the Manhattan. And then after that, he just tried to change it again. And you are in the world of Kulhas then.
Yes. So, that's very true.
But I think Moneo has can reposition Kulhas side to make that free section and crossing program is not always working, but it's always provide the jumping universe for our current method, and we can get this kind of a breakthrough in the architecture as a discipline. So I think that's a fulfilling in the area of architecture that architecture can offer. Somebody pushing their limit, and then it's becoming something that you can put a critical thinking towards it, and you get something else. I think we always learn from the kulhas.
But I think when you're saying like vocabularies, it's sort of like architects is the writer of that storyline. So we are we are kind of like listening to the story, because like you said, the Delirious New York, I enjoy it very much because he wrote it in a way it feels like he bring me to New York, and then but in the New York in his perspective, in his narrative. In this sense, like if we see buildings as vocabularies or words or grammars, it seems to be like the architect is the one who writing, like how do you travel through space, and also how do you see materials.
Maybe it's not, maybe the good word is translating.
Translation, yeah. And also in this sense, I would like to bring it into the writing in the writing, not the architectural language. So I think because last time I had a short conversation with him about literacy in a way, like to liberate in a way that like don't have to always build, we can write, like what he mentioned, like Omar Library is the kind of a new practice in a way. But before I ask Realrich, I would like to ask like Ryoga, what's your thought on Indonesian writing, especially in architecture? Do you think is it lacking or is it challenging?
Because like I never experienced studying in Indonesia before, so I don't know what is the scene of Indonesian writing. But I think like we have overall like lacking in literacy. Like not a lot of people like reading, even though like you can get a lot of from readings. Even you can start like by in our school, like there's a lot of like people reading fiction and inspired by it, and then doing architecture by it. And then like I feel like in a base level, I think like very generalized Indonesian, I think is very, very lacking on the reading literacy level.
Okay, which is much more on Indonesian poetry, is it? You mean like if putting into Indonesian context?
Yes.
They are more on stories and also poems.
Yeah, I think so, like that. But I don't feel like Indonesian like theory is a lot. I think you can fix it if I mistake in this observation. But I feel like that we are more onto like there's a lot of great literature.
Okay.
I feel like Indonesia, there's a lot of great poems and like a lot of like great poets, young poets right now. But like
but not architecture.
Not architecture. But I think like this generation will change.
Yeah.
A lot of good painter. I think like very good. One of like my favorite painters, Novel Absar, is a very young Indonesian painter. And then like poets, like a lot of like open mic here and there. So like we're trying to find our own DNA in the world, not only in architecture but in literature, in art, in
So really, when you write like architectural publication, do you think is something new, or there is actually a precedent study before that you started off with all this publication that you are doing now?
Actually, the story was quite funny when you just give it a shot like that, something like that.
Okay.
Don't really care about the context. Because we know that I mean when I started the Omar Library, I mean the first lecture is attended by I think 15 people, second lecture 20 people, and the third lecture only 3 people. And the fourth lecture is only 5 people. The fifth lecture is only 3 people again. So actually it's like a silent road. Actually it's like somebody care, but nobody attended. So by looking at that, I mean, I try to pursue for the students, the way that I teach, and I always ask them, "Oh, you want to come to talk about the architecture?" And it's more like focusing in the young people. I mean, young people meaning the students at that time, rather than focusing in the professional.
Yeah.
To be honest, so I think that's one of the starting point, and one of the milestone for us is just to create exhibitions for graduation show for the prominent architects. I mean, graduation show for prominent architects to show their final year project. I need to ask them, to rewind back them in time to release their ego and talk back again when they were still students. Yes. And by having that, they can be very close with the students that I like to talk with. So I think it's the maintaining the connections between the professional and the students will be very important. And being like what you said, like the translations between the academic and the practice, old and then young, is very important. I think the literacy make a hope that translation can happen and be archived.
Yes, that's right.
And it can put in it can brings a more economic sharing for both sides, the reader and the writer, and the doers and the thinkers, things like that.
I just wanted to, because since Ryorik mentioned about final year project when as a prominent architects, now maybe we can travel back in time. I want to ask Ryorik, what was your final year project in degree? Do you think there is a relationship to your current practice? Is it perhaps it's like a bamboo house?
Or material?
Yes. Not indirect, but my final project was designing the art gallery for Tisna Sanjaya. Tisna Sanjaya is a rebellious artisan who worked in the installations. And then at that time, my technique was to be more like a modernist and rational. And at that time, Tisna Sanjaya said, actually, I couldn't attend your presentations because I think someday you will know.
Oh, that's are you still waiting for him to approach to you and ask really?
Yes. and then when I presented my final project, I got very good. I mean, got standing applause, things like that, because everything is just like a drawing neatly, and then it's I did get the rationale. But Tisna Sanjaya has his view about fine art. He said that in Indonesia, the appreciation towards architecture, you need to look at the art first before appreciating the architecture. The art itself is not ready. So how come you can liberate architecture if you don't push the art to be even critical than before? I mean, looking at that, it means that my final year project has reached the limit that I can't go. And meaning that his limit still like that. It's great for me. I mean, he like have a praying for me that I can push the work towards the realm of imaginations to break the barrier on this Pandora box. So the relations between the making and the method, the rationale, is not about but having things more meaningful. So I think it's more like a providing relation to the social and the art of making, which is at that time, of course, I wasn't ready. Of course, it's too far. It's too far.
Yeah, I think because he was commenting from a perspective as an artist, so which is very different from how we practice and how we educated in a way. And also recently, I think this also linked to the second question I would like to ask, because I was reading this book by Norman Shaw, if not mistaken. He was writing a book called Architecture as a Profession or an Art. So which is very interesting because he comes of a background like William Morris, that the art and craft movement. So he believed the architecture as an art, but he also wanted to, the reason why he write this book, because he wanted to create this rebellious opposition to RIBA at that point of time, because RIBA tried to legalize the thing, and also legislation. I think it can't be wrong, because at the point of time they wanted to create this kind of registered architect.
Institutionalized.
Yeah, institutionalized things. So I would like to ask Ryrik, because that time we also talks about Sun Tzu Art of War. It's kind of very related to architectural practice and business in a very real deal, because I think that's very important, because I come from I work in a practice where I just can't stand with the fact that if, let's say, you have good ideas but you can't make it work, it's very suffering, because you can have good ideas but then you can't do the so-called business. Is like there's no output. There's always input but no output kind of thing. So so that makes me wonder, and it seems to be from Ryrik's point of view, it's much more like architecture as an art, then after that as a profession kind of thing. So Ryrik, I'm not sure, what do you think? Because also in the lecture you also mentioned how the role of architects could be a response to pandemic as well. This could be very critical in a way that this is just one test, because in the future we might have more barriers. For example, like financial crisis, we don't know when it might come, or any or political issues that will somehow change or alter the role of architects. And I always thought that architects are really based on land. Like if you don't have land, you cannot build. And then unless you have to wait like the building fall down or tunnel or or decay, and then only you can do some maybe adaptive reuse. I really curious, what is your thought in this sense? Like what is the future of architects' role? And also your involvement in OMA makes me expand in a way that architects not just about building, they could be educator, they could be librarian as well.
I mean, from my point of view, that art of war, meaning that we need to be able to strategize and repositions your critical thinking, your own positions, and it needs to be handled creatively. For example, we did the design for a chicken coop as an extension of Alpha Omega School, and the chicken coop right now become an industry for Alpha Omega. And what I did the calculations of selling egg business.
Right.
And calculation of construction costs and how to build, manage, learning, and to develop it. And after that, we help to sell it to our community. Meaning that my family helps to sell it to our neighborhood. So that's a love to support the school. That's the relations, the translation between I think somehow the translation between academic and practice sometimes is not seen and strong enough. That the relation needs to be made consciously. And sorry that I'm just to over generalize that. I got the presumption that, if you look at the school, it's quite capitalistic. Then creating a gift society. The capitalistic and gift society model can be challenged actually, and it can be integrated to be more open to the practice of the theory of the combination of both, practical or theory or whatever things. Then the practitioners can share the plus minuses learned from the projects. I think that's the dream. And the lecturer needs to be challenged to improve the pedagogy. So I think that's to create the platform that's focused on the students. I think that's quite critical. I think that the idea of the being critical, I think will interest, and to be more open, it will interest students. And that platform need to be open to students, which is more economic sharing. I think it's very straightforward. Exposed in the syllabus and output. It's very simple. Changing through time as well. Not status quo. and being integrative in the most advanced and the most traditional building technology, most advanced in the more industrial and the most traditional industrial most traditional technology. I mean, to have these two streams as well, you need to understand the traditional, you need to have a understanding of the industry, and it's not like in opposite. It's togetherness. It's very important to revive, to reconcile every layers in the society. So I think it's the long process of the war. I think
it's an ongoing.
I mean, it's ongoing war. We're going together, three of us.
Well, I think that's very interesting, and also I wanted to talk on one question because we read you as an educator, and I also read an article saying that in order for an architect student to fulfill the so-called what we as art and science holistically educated, it's gonna take at least like 10 years to finish, which I think our education makes it down only 4 years, the degree maximum, right? I wonder what is your suggestion in a way that is it possible for us to change the education system in a way that what if we can try more apprenticeship side, which is like more practice side rather than philosophy? I mean, it's still important, but it's just that I think with the limited time, what can you do,
Well, I know this question for Ryoga, but I want to argue with you actually with this.
Yeah.
Because like I think like architecture is like so many things you need to learn.
A lot, yeah.
A lot of things. Like there's no shortcut.
There's no shortcut.
There's no shortcut. You need to learn from A to Z,
Yeah.
Because of this, like even though it's apprenticeship that you go to school, right? You need to learn the first basic skill, the basic sense of design.
Yeah.
And then I think like when you go to school, you learn this basic kind of design, and then when you go to practice, you learn the business side. Because suddenly like bam, the reality hit you. It's like, bro, you cannot do that. It's like too expensive that you do it like that. You need to think about materiality. Is it affordable? Is it easy to build? Stuff like that. That's based on my experiences when I was.
But what do you think, Ryurik? Do you think we need to include like to study business in architecture school? I mean, we do, right? But it's not obvious in a way.
I mean, your question is like a very fundamental to reorganize the whole industry, Gary. I mean, you're quite. It's a serious question that I think to be able to enlighten the flame, you need the life of the flame. Okay, I want to be an architect. Oh, I love architecture so much. It's not easy as an educator. And we know that process to be an architect is quite long.
Yeah.
And the first idea of Bauhaus is to make it easy for students to understand architecture. Is very simple.
Yes.
And to make them happier when they study architecture. When we trace back, it's already like 100 years ago. This kind of thing. I mean, the question is, are we happier when we study architecture?
Because most of the time when I ask the architecture student, are you happy? No, please don't recommend your junior to do architecture.
or like, oh, welcome to the club.
I get a story about, I studied alvar and his life. There is that meaning that there is a architectural behavior in the code of conduct, which is extraordinary.
Yeah.
Carrying on tradition with no pretension is very difficult. For example, like a Goran Schild, which is friend of Aalto. He wrote 3 editions of a book of Aalto, like his friend. He wrote without pretension. A proof of love of friends. I mean, we have a camaraderie in architecture. I mean, I kind of think that, do we still living architecture, or we just having architecture as only a tool? I mean, the attitude is very important, but to teach attitude, we need to put togetherness, and then this kind of the togetherness, and to find the flame that how come you know that the architecture is so damn powerful. How architecture is so damn powerful, and that can make people smile, and that can save people's experience through their life. So I think I believe that architecture is more like into like uh, to get the credo is not easy. To get architecture as a service, it's not easy. But if there is a project that can open to our horizon, I think many architects will. I mean, if the client they're very supportive, I think it's becoming the joyful for the architects to jump into the project and work on it wholeheartedly. But the society sometimes they are not appreciating architecture that far. So I think our battle together is about to increase the appreciation towards architecture. So our pathway could be easier together to prove that architecture is so damn powerful. So I think that's is becoming the fantasy and imagination that I believe if we have like a repetition of the routines and it's becoming a stars.
I think
From the hardship.
I think in speaking of architecture practice is as an industry it should be reciprocal in a way that it's not one way, in a way that like you can have a very good architects, but if the client doesn't appreciate it's just one side of story, right? It just clapping with one hand, it doesn't make a sound, right? So I think that's a very critical point, and that time I remember reading a book saying that nowadays we are not short of good architects, but we're short of good appreciation and patronage in a way.
Right.
I think that's very important. I think just now I wanted to maybe ask last question, or Ryoga, do you wanted to add?
I'm curious about like because like what OMA library did is like want to inspire students to think more about architecture, to appreciate theory and like to think about this detail stuff like that. And I feel like if we see in Asia, the one that already developed a very deep root on architecture, I think it's only Japan. That's why like a lot of people is like like go to Japan for pilgrimage, and then and I don't know why. I just feel like this generation or the generation after it will start to bring Indonesia to join the conversation, the world conversation of architecture, where we develop our own DNA and then we develop our own language and grammar in Indonesia. What do you think about that, Riri? Because
Okay.
I'm very hopeful, actually.
I tried to find the answer of the questions. How come we can form our own DNA as a collective knowledge? And actually, that kind of attempt has been going since 1970s. As a form of regionalism, as a form of the arbitrary movement, just to show uniqueness, just to show you are different. I found out that the radical architects, I think radical architects meaning the architects that have a strong roots, that he can have the oneness meaning like a one heart. I call it undergo perfect pragma. It's a quality because of habit. In Bali, they call it taksu. And he loved what he made. And then it started with a small thing, and it started with a small group. And it is repeated from the simple matter. Whatever your movement is, it's giving rise for, I call it, becoming an architectural pandemic for the world. So whatever that you have your point of view is, I think if if you go like those kind of a perfect pragma and becoming taksu meaning a total architecture, you're pushing it that far. I think Indonesia can be seen as the part of the bigger society, and the bigger society can be seen as the part of Indonesia. I think it's not about a problem. It's not about the time to re-question about the identity too much. This is my call, because it's becoming here for ages, and it's about the daily routines. What do you want to do? To open the Pandora box, If not, everybody just ask for the guidance.
Yeah.
So I think it's not about the guidance. This represent a wayang puppet called Semar.
Yeah, Semar.
Semar meaning radical, meanings you do it, and you give it. You try to form a gift society, but you never be the central actor. You just being the advisor.
Yes.
And by not pulling everything to yourself, I think it's complete. So we can channel our energy to something else and walk again. So I think then become like a body of work, body of theory, and body of things that probably when we die, and people then start to appreciate. But when you live, you just feel nothing. You just walk.
Like leaving legacy.
No, because the setting is always like that, isn't it? Because like I don't know if it's like we think very avant-garde, that is like so ahead of time that people need time to digest this kind of thinking, this kind of theory. Because like a lot of artists, a lot of like writers, after they death, sadly, people start to understand what they're saying. It is because like it's like he's foreseeing like the society going to go this way, and then like our society right now is like having a connection with his literature or stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah, it's always like this.
So
it's sad, bro.
It's more. It's like if an artist want people to remember his or her art, so need to go die first. And after that, the value is more.
It's so sad, man.
But it depends. I think. I mean,
depends, correct? Yeah. Like Hockney is like right now is a very expensive living artist. Hockney, but like I think
like Van Gogh is different.
Van Gogh is different. Van Gogh is so sad, bro. But Hockney right now is like a very successful living artist, because I think he can.
Ryoga and Gary, I've got this. I just opened my secret.
Okay.
After every interview like this, and when Gary sent me the questionnaire, actually I will transcript it.
Yeah, I'll send you a transcript. Yeah.
And then I need to study what my position that I'm in, and then after that, if there is something not to, I mean, we can always perfect it, but it takes time to digest our routines. My point is not about the other people feel about us or interpret about us. Is their problem. It's their rights, and I leave it up to them. But in the matter of our own interpretation, I think the reconciliation, when when Gary sent the questions about some of the work or some of the thinking, I really take it profoundly.
Thank you so much, Ruri.
because in that time, milestone that somebody knows me and my work and my team's work, I think that's profound. And that's a milestone for now. And after this is becoming another things, if we can evaluate that kind of positions. And I think that's that things I call it like that, a pragma is pragmatic, is a habitius. That's I think that's the the way the makers or the creative things happening, we need the other people to carry us forward.
Yeah.
That's why there is a curator and there is a theorist and there is a thing. I think the architect should shut down their mouth if somebody talk about their work. That's it. Me as well, I need to shut down my mouth.
Really, like, sorry for prolonging like this too long, but like this make me really curious and interested, like, because like when I was talked to Gary so long, like we can spend the whole day talking about theory, talking about architecture, and like when I talk, right, I suddenly like understand myself better. It's like, oh, actually, like that's what I get from this book, and I'm like, oh, this is what I understand from this book, and I'm like, this is what I interpret, and it's like you begin to talking about it. It's like you know more about it. It's like, did you get this feeling? You strengthen your understanding of architecture, your theory when you're teaching as well, because like you've been saying the same thing, like you've been saying, is it correct or not, something like that.
Yes, yeah, that's one of the secret. That's I need to teach.
Yes.
I need to teach because the testing ground actually is the teaching. The testing ground is not about the meaning that I got a lesson that from my professor John Lang and James. They're like professor of the architectural theory. That he said that in order to test your thinking, you need to talk it, you need to write it, and the last part, in order to execute and pilot, you need to teach people and see their reaction.
Yes.
If their reaction is just weird face, or you're damn wrong.
Yeah, because I think that's very true. I think that's what I learned as well, because there is a theory called pyramids of learning. So when you listen to lecture, it's just perhaps the lowest one. You read a book and then you perhaps in the middle, but the toughest at the tip is when you learn and then you teach others, and then that's how you learn the most, because it's like book review. I tell you what's good about Corbusier, and then I actually process myself and I deliver.
And I ask you questions like, hey, I don't think this is right. It's like, hey, really? You need to really book that. So you're going back and forth. Like, this is why very interesting.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask one last question before we can end this. Just now, Ryoga, you also mentioned like the greatest achievement is to design a building that make people smile. I wonder, is there any building that make you smile, or the building that perhaps you visited and you feel like, wow, this is so powerful, or this is so touching in a way?
I'm not trying to be critical.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be creative in this mode. So far, I had a transformation period. I have 4 buildings that's inspired me a lot. The first building, the whole composition, because when I did a pilgrimage, I visited like a series of the buildings crazily. So crazily, their work crazily. I studied all of them like a manuscript. I read all of them.
Yeah.
The first one is inspired from the Frampton. And then the Siegfried Gideon. The work done by Carlo Scarpa. Yes, I think it shows about how he pushed the tectonics grammar. But the most interesting part is he dwelled with the builders, and he has the squad of the builders. And he tested the projects in a long period, like a 20 years, 10 years of the building time. And the quality, you cannot tell about the quality, the explorations. You see the projects inside the projects. You see the project inside the project. That's the idea of the tectonics and the scarpa. So tectonics become a projects. I think Kevin Marlowe or Gehry or several great architects, they did it, like Louis Kahn and Frank Lloyd Wright. They did all of this approach, projects inside the projects.
Yeah,
But
detail
the
itself.
project is this is a tectonics. Yeah. That's the first thing. The second one is the Indonesian architect Mangunwijaya. In his view, architecture is not only architecture. Architecture is a social mission, and he dwell with the builder as well.
Yes.
And then he has this workshop inside his home, and his home is the place for the praying as well.
Yes.
And he lose all of his robe as a priest.
Yes.
He leave it, and then he touch with the people. So I think that's quite profound, and his work is quite profound. When it's like become landscape, it's become a material, it's become like it's a new way of deconstructing the material and the method. In that time, I think he has no leak. He did not groups. He just focused in his work. By having a mangunwijaya, I call architecture as a mission. Like a learner, he's like a social. I mean, make people smile in a private or commercial or whatever projects. So he write as well.
Yes.
The literacy, and he wrote so many books, like a novel, fantasy, imaginations. It's amazing. So he has quite a body of work. I think that's the inspiration for me for literacy as well, who started me to have Oma as our place together for writing and reading.
Yeah.
The third architect is alvar
Alvar.
Because when you enter his project, it's usual, It's so damn alvar. It's usual. I can predict his technique, He started with the double height void. He started with the very usual corridor. He started with this small bending curve. But when you touch the handle, it's alvar. So in that project, I can learn total architecture, Ryoga. He can put that architecture in the levels of product design.
Yes.
Now, I don't think that in architects in that period that I learned can push the architecture that far to integrate industry towards the craftsmanship, art of making, and become pandemic to the world.
Yes.
The detail, the glass vase is becoming like the norm,
Yeah.
And vitra, things like that, and the chair and everything. It's become product.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the fourth one, I think I call him my, probably he did not know me. I mean, he did not know that I respected him quite deep. He's a Thai architect. His name is Boonserm.
Boonserm.
Oh, I never heard.
It's Boonserm Premthada. He's actually an interior designer.
Okay.
But his work, I kind of feel that I got a mentor, I've been practicing this quite far, and I don't have many friends that I can talk and share my thoughts and like throwing the theory and discussing. Only with Boonserm, I found out that the context and the simplicity of the ethos of working, they're very profound. His work is creating an elephant museum in one area in Surin. Way profound. It's the way that he made the plywood. I hope he will get very profound award for it, because he can prove that architecture is so damn powerful. The name is Boonserm Premthada. BOONSERM Premthada. I talked with him 3 times, and I spent in one talk like 2 hours with him. And then his work is not too many, and he told me these sentences that I never forget. He said something like this: Realrich, when you look at your work, please be careful. You don't need to publish so many works. You only focus on several works that's meaning for you, and then you need to focus on that body of work, because everybody watching. When everybody watching an architect, they should have an obligations not to market the projects. Like they should tell story to form the gift society. And then the last part, he said, you are my student, and then I will watch you, and you are, and we'll talk together. I mean, we will talk again later. I never get that kind of message from the people that treat me as their students. For me, it's quite profound. And after that, we dance in front of the buildings that's just in the open house by his friend, and he invited me, and we dance just in front of the. I mean, they're like a old folk song in the Thai, and I was feeling like I was invited by them, and then it's become like a one brotherhood. And come on, I'm not Thai. So architecture is just a universal. He teach me something like that. It's opened up my eyes that, okay, the world is flat, we are brother under the same sun, under the same moon. So why we need to compete? We just do compete with ourselves, and we are like watching each other, support each other. So from that part, I always say to my student, don't worry, I'll be your mentor. So something like a guarding you, something like you have like a take care of people. I think that's the fourth architect. He's still alive, so I kind of following his work as well.
So rather than a race, it is a discussion. It's a big.
That's right.
Yeah, and I really appreciate. I mean, I think for the whole conversation, even though we haven't really met each other physically, but I always thought like Ryoga is kind of like my mentor, because he really inspired me to to do a lot of things. And Omar Library and also his practice is like a real example of someone who can actually do more than just what I believe by conventional definition of architecture. And also I'm quite surprised with the 4 architects that he picked up in, is because like there is a common point that I would say is this kind of participatory experience, how to connect yourself and engage with whether it's material or builder or even the general public. So especially the Indonesian architect, the priest one, Romangun. So he is the give me the kind of vibe like Alejandro Aravena or Bernard Rudolphski house, like architecture with the architects. So like try to put down his professional idea or identity to engage with the public, and if the outcome is so not architecture in a way, but because he not trying to like get award or whatsoever, but it's a rather vernacular base or trying to connect with the place, and this kind of so-called chaotic is the most genuine value, I would say, because you also mentioned like Indonesian architecture is always been this kind of very trying not to follow the rules, because it's like you can create your own rules kind of thing.
Yeah. And I feel like our society is like that though.
Yeah.
Very anarchist. I can say like that. I enjoy it a lot actually.
It's like rules are meant to be broken. Yeah. So thanks a lot, Ryoga. I really enjoyed the whole conversation, and I really appreciate it. And I think the whole conversation, like you said, is not about finding answers, but more questions to bounce and create more questions and answers. Speaking of that, I would like to invite you to throw one question to our audience, or because we have been asking you so many questions, and I thought perhaps you have any open questions for our audience, or for both of us also can, right? So any question, it could be architectural or non-architectural, but it could be anything. Yeah.
I have done the research for these questions. But I think this question, if somebody need to answer, I mean, if somebody answer it, I think it's gonna be help for our country. So the question is, how do you think? How do you think to get the best ingredients for finding the DNA of Indonesian architecture? Sometimes because of this, sometimes people inside they cannot understand ourselves better. We need other people outside to get our positions, to know our positions and to judge our positions. And I think the ingredients probably help as what people trying to find right now.
I do find this question
This is very hard, bro.
very resonating, because I think as a Malaysian, I sort of share this kind of colonialism of, you know, like this kind of experience where if you ask me like what is Malaysian architecture, I barely find one, because you have, you know, British architecture or Malacca Empire, and then for Indonesia perhaps it's a Dutch era, you know, and then after that we've been changing, and then just now we've been talking about like Japanese architecture. So there is so many layers of recipe going on and here and there. Yeah, I think that could be very interesting, and so many questions, answers pop up.
But like I want to raise another question. Maybe it is not the ingredients, but it's the technique.
It's a technique.
You know, it's like cooking. It's not the ingredients, but Indonesian always deep fried. Something like that. Like maybe it's the technique that we need to find. That's really Indonesian. I don't know as well. It's a very hard question. That's why I really keen to go back and join the conversation of Indonesian architecture scene.
Yeah. So I believe that's pretty much about it. And sorry, Ririk, do you have anything to add on before we end this?
No, I'm waiting for the answer so I can compare my answer and other people's answers.
I hope that the audience who are listening here can always feel free to comment
we can compare. You know, it's interesting. Discourse.
Try to create some hoo-ha and noises. But okay, I believe that's pretty much about it. And thanks a lot, Ryoga and Ririk, for your time. It's really wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I can't wait to visit you in Indonesia, and because Ryoga will be back soon as well. So I believe
feel welcome whenever call me.
Yeah,
I'm ready here.
Okay.
Just come.
Okay. Okay, so I guess that's pretty much about it. And thanks a lot for Ryoga and
thank you for the enthusiasm, Gary, Ryoga. This opens up to my mind to some of the discourse and interpretation that you guys have intentions. So I think that's quite a critical for me to think about all of this question, all of your thoughts and your judgment about the architecture, how it takes and how you interpret back. I think I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I really hope that, see him. I think Ririk also constantly updating his Instagram as well. And I've seen some projects ongoing in construction as well. So I can't wait to see more. And also mangunwijaya, I have been constantly updating because Ririk is very hardworking updating that. And it's like very up to date. And then he always add little things. And mangunwijaya itself is a very interesting story. So we can always reflecting on that as well. So thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoy your Sunday, and thanks a lot for spending your time on Sunday. So I hope to catch up again.
Yes. Okay. Take care.
Right, thank you,
Gary. Ryoga.
Thanks, Ryoga.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.